You are listening to the news on RainierAvenueRadio.World. I am Karen Z. Today is Wednesday, February 20th, 2019. The news on Rainier Avenue Radio is live every Wednesday from 6:30 to 7 p.m. Pacific Time, providing you with current, trustworthy, useful news content focused on super service to the local South Seattle audience. We will not tell you what to think, but instead provide the basics for you to discern and decide for yourself. In local news, an 86-year-old woman was hit on a Beacon Hill sidewalk by an impaired driver and seriously injured on Tuesday after the driver plowed into her as she walked down a sidewalk in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. The woman was walking south on 15th Avenue South just before South Spokane around 9 a.m. The 48-year-old driver also headed south on 15th, crossed into the northbound lanes and drove his Ford Fusion up onto the sidewalk, hitting the woman. She was taken to the local hospital with serious injuries. Neither the driver nor his passenger were injured. Seattle police had to get a warrant to get a blood sample from the driver. In the meantime, he was taken to the King County Jail on a vehicular assault charge. And in other news, Sounder trains were halted today after a man was killed by an Amtrak train. Sound Transit trains were being held at King Street Station in Seattle on Wednesday afternoon after a man was hit and killed by an Amtrak train in Tukwila around 3 p.m. near I-5, affecting trains headed south to Sumner, Kent, and Lakewood. All Sounder South Line trains are being held for an undetermined amount of time. Sound Transit recommends that passengers consider alternate transportation. Regularly scheduled bus information has been posted online, and Sound Transit will continue to provide updates if you are checking on your commute. If you are a commuter headed to Lakewood, you can take the bus routes 590 and 594, and passengers headed to Puyallup should take routes 577 and 578. The area where the man was hit is behind the Foster Golf Course along Interurban Avenue South if you are in that area. And also in local news, Tim Eyman was charged with stealing a chair and says that it was a mistake. Anti-tax initiative promoter Tim Eyman has been charged with misdemeanor theft after taking a chair from an Office Depot store in Lacey without paying. Surveillance video showed Eyman sitting in the chair in the store's entryway last Wednesday, spinning around a few times and then walking it out to the parking lot. Police say he then returned, exchanged one printer, and bought new ones. Through his lawyers, Eyman issued a statement saying that it would be ridiculous for him to have stolen the $70 chair while wearing an easily identifiable shirt with his motto on it. Eyman said he intended to pay for the chair but received a call on his cell phone, became distracted, and forgot. Over to you, Kendra.
Thanks, Karen. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan signed an executive order Wednesday in an effort to create more affordable housing and protect long-term residents from being displaced. Durkan's executive order directs the city's housing office to create a community preference policy. This would allow city-funded developers of affordable housing to give folks who have been displaced the first crack at new units. The order also calls for requesting more state resources to help prevent displacement and create more affordable housing, and asks for investments in existing neighborhoods with higher displacement rates. To help create a city of the future, we must work together to protect against gentrification and displacement and make it possible for families to stay in Seattle, Mayor Durkan said in a Wednesday news release. Affordable housing has been a special focus for Durkan in recent months. Quote, "As Seattle has grown, we have seen far too many communities of color pushed out of their homes in Rainier Beach, the Central District, Beacon Hill, and Chinatown International District. With this executive order, we are refocusing our work on strategies to prevent displacement and gentrification." Early in February, she advanced a $90 million project to develop Discovery Park's Fort Lawton into more than 200 affordable homes. In November, ground was broken on the future site of 102 new housing units in Seattle's Little Saigon neighborhood for those experiencing long-term homelessness, as part of a larger effort to house 2,500 city-funded affordable rental homes by 2021. The month before that, Mayor Durkin marked the opening of a 69-unit low-income housing site in what used to be the fire station in Lake City. As we entered the last week or so of Black History Month, you can still attend these following events. Until February 20th, you can still get tickets to Central Cinema's showing of the blaxploitation film Sweetback's Badass Song for $2 to $10. Tomorrow at 6:30, the Central Library will host Memoirs from the Diaspora, Not for Consumption, for free. On the same night, from 7 to 8:30 p.m., Renton Highlands Library will have free virtual tour of Renton's African American historical sites. The new Freeway Hall has a forum called Fighting Racism on the Job, planned for Saturday, February 23rd, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. The entry fee is around $2 to $15. Sunday, February 24th, from 1 to 2 p.m., the Renton Library will have an event about the life and legacy of the prolific science fiction titan Octavia Butler. You can find out more other sites on Google or the internet. And this is the news on RainierAvenueRadio.World. We will be back with national news after this short break. Welcome back to RainierAvenueRadio.World. The New York City Commission on Human Rights released new guidelines this week considering racial discrimination in regards to hair. According to the New York Times, this change will consider the targeting of people based on their hair or hairstyle at work, school, or in public places as racial discrimination. It's meant to apply to anyone in New York City, but it is aimed at, quote, remedying the disparate treatment of black people, unquote. The guidelines specifically say that New Yorkers maintain the right to natural hair, treated or untreated hairstyles such as lows, cornrows, twists, braids, bantu knots, fades, afros, and or the right to keep a hair uncut or in an untrimmed state. This would give individuals the ability to seek legal recourse if they were harassed, threatened, punished, demoted, or fired because of the texture or style of their hair. The City Commission can levy penalties up to $250,000 on defendants that are found in violation of the guidelines, and there is no cap on damages. The Commission can also force internal policy changes and rehirings at offending institutions. In Raleigh, North Carolina, a North Carolina elections regulator revealed on Monday that a ballot scheme took place last year in the state's 9th Congressional District. The regulator, Kim Strack, is the executive director of the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Strack said there was a, quote, coordinated, unlawful, and substantially resourced absentee ballot scheme, potentially involving more than 1,000 absentee ballots or request forms, unquote. The Republican nominee, Mark Harris, has a 905-vote lead over his Democratic rival, Dan McCready, but state officials last year refused to certify Mr. Harris as the winner because of concerns about irregularities in absentee balloting. The hearing's outcome could undermine Republicans' assertions that they had a hard line against election fraud. The state board could certify the results or order a new election in the 9th District, which includes parts of Charlotte and a vast stretch of southeastern North Carolina. Over to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Kendra. The Trump administration says it intends to cancel a $929 million federal grant for California's high-speed rail project. The administration also wants to reclaim another $2.5 billion in federal funds already spent by California on the project. The Department of Transportation is accusing California officials of missing several deadlines tied to the $929 million appropriation for the state's high-speed rail line. In a letter from the Federal Railroad Administration to the California High-Speed Rail Authority, the federal officials say they will terminate the grant effective March 5th. The FRA letter adds that the agency is concerned that California is changing its original plan to, quote, connect San Francisco in the north and Los Angeles and Anaheim in the south. In the State of the State address last week, Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, proposed to scale back the project and focus on completing a link in the Central Valley between Bakersfield and Merced. A day later, President Trump tweeted that California's high-speed rail project was, quote, a green disaster, end quote, and demanded that the state return billions of federal dollars. California has been forced to cancel the massive bullet train project after having spent and wasted many billions of dollars, Trump said. He continued, they owe the federal government $3.5 billion, and we want that money back now. Newsom responded with his own tweet saying, quote, "Fake news. We're building high-speed rail connecting the Central Valley and beyond. This is California's money allocated by Congress for this project, and we're not giving it back. The train is leaving the station. Better get on board." Also, desperately searching for some wall money. In a statement on Tuesday, Newsom said that the Trump administration's threat is clear political retribution tied to California's involvement in a lawsuit challenging the president's emergency declaration to build a border wall. Trump himself connected the two issues in a tweet on Tuesday. Quote, "As I predicted, 16 states led mostly by open border Democrats and the radical left have filed a lawsuit in, of course, the Ninth Circuit. California, the state has wasted billions of dollars on their out-of-control fast train with no hope of completion, seems in charge," said Trump. The cost of the original plan to build a high-speed link between San Francisco and Los Angeles is currently estimated at $77 billion, about twice the initial price tag. As the Associated Press reports, the $929 million that Trump is threatening to cancel was approved by Congress nearly a decade ago. It is not clear how the administration can force California to return the $2.5 billion it has already spent, although the FRA letter says the agency is exploring all available legal options. In other news, Houston police are going to end the use of no-knock warrants after a deadly drug raid. The Houston Police Department will largely end the practice of forcibly entering homes to search them without warning, the police chief said this week, following a deadly drug raid last month that the agency conceded might have been based on faulty information. The change, announced Monday night, came days after Chief Art Acevedo said that an officer had lied about using a confidential informant to justify searching the home. 2 civilians were killed, and 4 officers were shot during that raid on January 28th. Now, so-called no-knock warrants, a widespread but often criticized tactic in criminal investigations, will largely be prohibited, Chief Acevedo announced at a town hall meeting on Monday. If officers want an exception to search homes without warning, they will need his express permission. On Tuesday, a police spokesman declined to elaborate on the chief's comments at the meeting, and Chief Acevedo did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Typically, when police officers try to search homes, they must first knock and announce their presence, but the special no-knock warrants seek to use the element of surprise to catch drug dealers and other criminals off guard. The practice has also been widely criticized for putting the police, suspects, and bystanders in unavoidable, potentially deadly situations. A 2017 investigation by the New York Times found at least 81 civilians and 13 law enforcement officers died in no-knock and other similar raids in the country from 2010 through 2016, just 6 years. Robert J. Loudon, a professor emeritus of criminal justice and homeland security at Georgian Court University in New Jersey, said he did not think other police departments would follow Houston's example. He said that no-knock warrants were a necessary police tactic, provided they are based on sound intelligence, which sounds to not have been the case in the Houston raid, based on the allegation that an officer had lied to get the warrant. The January 28th drug raid and the high number of the police casualties had fixated attention on the country's 4th largest city. The police identified 2 suspects who were killed, Dennis Tuttle, 59, and Regina Nicholas, 58. The 2 had fired on officers entering the home, the police said. Chief Acevedo had previously said that the police found small amounts of cocaine and marijuana in the house. Over the weekend, he maintained that the police had reason to investigate the home, but that there were, quote, material untruths or lies, end quote, in an affidavit for a search warrant that led to the raid. We'll be back after a short break with global news. This is the news on RainierAvenueRadio.World. Welcome back to RainierAvenueRadio.World. Honda plans to leave Britain as Brexit draws close. The Japanese automaker Honda plans to close its plant in Swindon, England, which employs 3,500 workers by 2021. According to the New York Times, Honda is the latest business to retrench, quote, in the face of sluggish markets, tougher environmental regulation, and challenges from deep-pocketed technology companies that are pursuing electric and autonomous driving cars, end quote. The company stands to benefit from a new trade deal between the European Union and Japan, which will make it easier to produce cars in Japan for export to the bloc. Their production lines in Japan will also be closer to markets viewed as having greater growth potential, like China and Indonesia. The continued stalemate over Brexit has made it more difficult for businesses to plan their operations past March 29th, the day of departure. Investment in the country's auto industry plummeted by half in 2018, prompting a recent plea from the Automakers Trade Association. Other companies have also began the process to remove their operations from Britain in the wake of Brexit. The British carmaker Jaguar Land Rover stated that it would cut 4,500 people from its workforce because of geopolitical and regulatory disruptions. The appliance company Dyson is moving its headquarters from southwest England to Singapore as it prepares to bring an electric vehicle to the market. Over to you, Kendra.
Thanks, Natalie. The Vatican will hold a 4-day meeting on Thursday, which will address the systematic sexual abuse against minors in the Roman Catholic Church. The meeting, titled The Protection of Minors in the Church, will bring together 190 participants, including 114 presidents of bishops' conferences or their delegates, representatives from 14 Eastern churches in communion with Rome, female and male leaders of religious orders, and the chiefs of several Vatican congregations. According to the New York Times, victims of sexual abuse will speak of their experiences during evening prayers, but will not otherwise attend the meeting. At a Vatican news conference on Monday, the prelates tasked by the Pope with organizing the meeting stated that bishops needed to be held accountable for addressing the problem and emphasized that homosexuality was not a cause of the abuse of minors by priests. They also stressed the need for greater transparency, which is why the Vatican's website for the closed-door events will live stream parts of the meeting and report on the contents of others. In Russia, the Foreign Intelligence Service has asked a court to continue holding former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, who has been detained since December on suspicion of spying. A court in Moscow had wanted to hold Whelan until February 28th, but Russia's Foreign Security Service, or FSB, wants Whelan detained through May 28th, the Interfax news agency said, according to Reuters. The Russian government announced on New Year's Eve that it had detained Whelan on suspicion of receiving classified information in a Moscow hotel. His first public appearance came January 22nd when he stood inside a glass-enclosed defendant's cage during a court hearing in Moscow. The judge declined to release him on bail, and he was sent back to his prison cell, NPR's Moscow correspondent Lucian Kim reported. Whelan has been accused of accepting a flash drive from a Russian citizen that listed all employees of a Russian security agency. Former CIA officer Dan Hoffman, who once served as Moscow station chief, told NPR's Greg Meyer that the Russians are known to plant false evidence. Quote, "This has all the hallmarks of a Russian KGB-style setup." Whelan's family said he was in Russia to attend a friend's wedding, and Whelan's attorney has said his client thought the thumb drive he received contained photos of Russian churches. He was expecting to see on the flash drive some personal information like pictures or videos, something like that, about the person's previous trips around Russia, Vladimir Zerebnikov told reporters, according to the Associated Press. He continued to say, "We don't know how the materials that contain state secrets ended up there." Whelan works as a head of global security for Borg Warner, a Michigan supplier of automotive parts. His twin brother, who serves as the family's de facto spokesperson, told NPR's Lucian Kim that relatives hadn't received any official confirmation from Russia about why Paul was thought to be a spy and what happened. Russia has classified the case as top secret. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif accused Israel of engaging in quote-unquote adventurism with its bombing campaigns in Syria and said he could not rule out the possibility of a military conflict between the countries. Zarif told a German newspaper that Iran was in Syria at the invitation of the Syrian government, while Israel was violating Lebanese and Syrian airspace as well as international law. Quote, "There is adventurism on Israel's side, and adventurism is always dangerous." Asked if he saw an emerging military conflict between Iran and Israel, Zarif said, "I do not, but we cannot exclude the possibility." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel has carried out hundreds of attacks in Syria over the past several years and will ramp up its fight following the planned withdrawal of U.S. troops from the country. Israel is trying to counter the influence carved out in Syria by Iran, which has supported Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the war that erupted in 2011. It's said Tehran's actions are the main destabilizing factor in the Middle East. Zarif, speaking at the Munich Security Conference on Sunday, accused Israel of looking for war and warned that its actions and those of the United States were increasing the chances of a clash in the region. This is RainierAvenueRadio.World. We will be back with sports after this short break.
Yes, welcome back to the Radio Avenue News. This is Keith Beasley. Anthony Joshua fights outside the UK. It will be the first for the British unified heavyweight champion, Anthony Joshua, to fight in general outside the UK. He will be facing Brooklyn native Jarrell Miller to defend his title against Miller in his hometown of Madison Square Garden. A day ago, there was a press conference in Brooklyn. Things got heated between the two when Miller pushed Joshua. Afterwards was the trash talking. Normally, it is to hype the audience and get more tickets to sell, but this seemed personal between the two. It is not the first time they exchanged words. Over to you, Macerio.
I'm Macerio Clark here with the Athletes of the Week. Jamaican high school senior Austin Algamer won her second consecutive state title at this year's MAC Classic 31 State Wrestling Tournament. He finished the season 33-3 and ended his high school career with a record of 149-17. Stanwood High School standout Chanel Siva won state wrestling title in a 235-pound weight class with a 3-2 victory. Colville's high school senior Trent Baum capped his senior season off with a 3-1 title victory at the 132-pound weight class, joining four-time state champion club at the MAC Classic 31 in the Tacoma Dome. He became the 16th boy to win 4 state titles and 20th wrestler overall to accomplish the feat. Now over to you, Kara and Kendra.
Thanks, Macerio. The Transportation Security Administration, TSA, is holding a one-day recruitment and hiring event on Saturday, February 23rd to recruit full-time and part-time transportation security officers, or TSOs, to work at a Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Starting pay is $20.34 per hour. Interested individuals are invited to begin the application and hiring process by coming to SeaTac Office Center, 18000 International Boulevard in Seattle between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. In order to be considered for employment, applicants are required to have 2 valid forms of state or federal identification. Examples of acceptable forms of identification are a driver's license, military ID card, passport, or a certified copy of a birth certificate. TSA is looking to hire more than 175 TSOs to work at SeaTac Airport. The goal is to have many of those who attend this TSO recruitment event on board and working ahead of the 2019 summer travel season, which is projected to be the busiest ever at SeaTac Airport. And now, over to Karen.
Thank you, Kendra. RainierAvenueRadio.World has been broadcasting high school basketball games throughout the entire season, including the quarterfinals and the semifinals this last weekend. And next week, we will be live from the Tacoma Dome for the WIAA Hardwood Classic. We will be joining the opening ceremonies on Tuesday, February 26th, and we will be at Tacoma Dome while the teams and their coaches are coming in and getting a tour of the facilities, and we'll be talking with them a bit behind the scenes before the tournament starts on Wednesday, February 27th, and we'll be going all the way through March 2nd. And we also will be hosting a special event, the WIAA Appreciation Night, live from the Clarion Inn near JBLM, and that will be happening the evening of Thursday, February 28th. You can stay tuned for details as well as updates on what games that we plan on broadcasting by keeping an eye on our blog on RainierAvenueRadio.World, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can expect to see some familiar faces from our broadcasts all season, including Tony B., sports director Rick Dupree, Juan Cotto, who's co-show host for the new WIAA Primetime Sports Weekly show, as well as our very own Paul Pearson coming in from our South Puget Sound branch, and a variety of other personalities that you have gotten to know over the season, providing information to you over this 4 days of exciting high school basketball tournament. You have been listening to the news on RainierAvenueRadio.World. Once again, this is Wednesday, February 20th. You can catch us live every Wednesday from 6:30 to 7 p.m., providing you with current, trustworthy, useful news content focused on super serving our local South Seattle audience. We will not tell you what to think, but instead provide the basics for you to discern and decide for yourself.